The morning light spills through the curtains. Margaret wakes slowly, the air cool and quiet. She stretches her fingers, one by one, feeling the stiffness of time. Her knees ache, her shoulders resist. Every movement feels like turning the pages of an old book. She remembers when mornings used to dance, when her body moved without thought, without effort. Now it takes patience and a deep breath. She sits at the edge of her bed, listening to her heartbeat. The world outside hums softly, waiting. For a moment, she wonders if this is just how it is after 60. Then she smiles, a small, knowing smile. Because she's learned that the body, like the heart, remembers. It only needs a little kindness to begin again. So she lifts her arms slowly toward the ceiling. A gentle stretch. A promise to herself. To move, to breathe, to begin. And in that quiet room, the day unfolds like a soft melody. A new chapter, written not in hurry but in grace. Margaret used to dance every morning. Barefoot light, her body a river of rhythm and ease. She loved how movement felt like freedom, how the air lifted her soul. But time, as it always does, began to whisper its weight. At 62, her body no longer moved the same way. Her knees complained. Her back stiffened after long nights of reading. Her hands, once so expressive, now trembled with hesitation. It wasn't sudden. It happened quietly, in little moments she barely noticed. One morning she reached for her cup of tea and felt a dull ache shoot through her wrist. Another day, she tried to bend down to tie her shoes and froze halfway. Her breath caught. Her body refused. And for the first time, she felt like a stranger inside her own skin. She told herself it was fine. Just age. Everyone said it happens. But the silence after those words felt heavy. Because deep down she missed herself, the version that moved without fear. She missed the mornings when her body felt alive, not cautious. She missed that quiet joy that comes when you stretch, reach, and feel strong. Then one day, she watched a little girl play in the park. The child ran, stumbled, laughed, and got up again. Her movements were wild, imperfect, full of life. Margaret smiled, and something inside her stirred, not envy but remembrance. The body doesn't forget, she thought. It waits for you to return. That evening, she stood by her window as the sky turned gold. She placed her hands on her hips and rolled her shoulders back. A small motion. A beginning. The joints creaked, the muscles resisted. But she breathed through it. Slowly, deeply. The stiffness began to melt, like ice softening under sun. Each breath carried a message: you are still here. She stretched her arms overhead, feeling the gentle pull along her spine. Her body answered with warmth. A memory awakening. She felt something shift, not just in her muscles but in her spirit. It wasn't about returning to youth. It was about reclaiming presence. She realized movement wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, a way to say thank you to the vessel that carried her through life. The next morning, she did it again. And the morning after that. Little by little, the stiffness faded. Not completely, but enough for her to feel light again. Her steps grew steadier, her breath deeper, her smile easier. She no longer saw stretching as a chore. It became a conversation between her mind, her breath, and her aging body. A reminder that even after 60, the story of movement is far from over. And every gentle stretch she made whispered the same truth. You can begin again at any age. You can still move with grace. You can still come home to yourself. Margaret began to wonder why her body had changed so much. Why the same movements that once felt natural now felt foreign. She read articles, listened to her doctor, and learned something new. It wasn't just age that stiffened her joints. It was time spent still. The years of sitting, waiting, postponing motion. Her muscles had grown shorter, her joints tighter, her breath shallower. The body, she realized, is like a river. It flows when it moves. But when it's still, it begins to dry. Everyday habits had quietly shaped her pain. She would wake, sit for hours with her morning tea, then move too suddenly. Her knees would protest. Her spine would crack. Her shoulders would ache, as if carrying invisible weight. She used to think pain was the enemy. Now she began to see it as a messenger. The body's way of saying, "You've forgotten me." She remembered her younger days of motion without awareness. She danced, but she never listened. She stretched, but never noticed the whisper beneath the skin. Now every small ache spoke louder. Her doctor told her about the science of stiffness, how muscles lose elasticity when unused, how collagen tightens, how circulation slows, leaving joints dry and unready. But the same science offered hope, because what becomes tight can also be loosened. What becomes still can flow again. The human body is astonishing that way. It remembers movement, even after years of silence. Margaret smiled when she heard that. It felt like hearing an old song she once loved. Her body had been waiting, not broken. It needed patience, not punishment. So she decided to begin again, not through force but understanding. She started noticing how she moved through her day. How long she sat, how often she reached, how rarely she stretched. She began to add small pauses, a twist of the spine, a roll of the ankle. Tiny gestures that whispered life back into her joints. She learned that stiffness wasn't just in the muscles. It was in the rhythm of her days, the pace of her thoughts. The body reflects the mind, she thought. Tightness begins inside. So she breathed slower, moved gentler, listened closer. Every stretch became an act of gratitude. Every breath a quiet reminder, I am still here. Her movements grew softer but more alive. She could feel her joints warming, her body humming with quiet energy. It wasn't about chasing youth anymore. It was about building harmony. Understanding the why gave her strength to continue. Each morning she rose, not to fight stiffness but to soothe it. She no longer saw her body as aging, but adapting. Learning new ways to move, new ways to be free. The science made sense, but the feeling made truth. Her body wasn't giving up. It was simply asking her to return. The next morning the light was soft, quiet and golden. Margaret stood by her window, her breath steady, her body calm. She had promised herself to move, no matter how gently. So she began her first full body stretch, slow and patient. She rolled her shoulders back, feeling the gentle crack of awakening joints. Her arms lifted upward, reaching toward the ceiling, fingers trembling slightly. The stretch felt both strange and familiar, like greeting an old friend. She inhaled deeply, letting air fill her chest, then exhaled with relief. Her breath became her guide, her rhythm her silent teacher. She turned her neck slowly, side to side, listening for any tightness. A soft ache reminded her that healing takes time. Then she placed her hands on her hips and began gentle circles. Her spine moved carefully, her lower back loosened bit by bit. Each motion was small, but full of intention. She reached forward, folding at her waist, letting her arms dangle freely. Her fingers brushed the air just above her toes. The stretch tugged at her hamstrings, but it was a good pain, the kind that releases. She stayed there, breathing through the tightness, letting her body trust again. Slowly she rolled up, vertebra by vertebra, until she stood tall once more. Her heartbeat was calm, her breath smooth, her body lighter. She smiled softly, realizing she had missed this, the art of moving slowly. Next, she lifted one leg, balancing gently, circling her ankle with care. Her knee wobbled, her foot trembled, but she laughed instead of worrying. It wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. She switched sides, her body adjusting, learning its balance again. Then she reached her hands out to the sides, opening her chest to the morning. The sunlight kissed her fingertips. She breathed in gratitude, as if the light itself was filling her lungs. For a moment she felt ageless. Not 62, not older, just alive, fully here. She moved into a gentle twist, one hand on her knee, the other behind her. Her spine stretched like a slow river, releasing years of stored stillness. She could almost feel the weight leaving her body, one breath at a time. Her movements became like poetry, slow and meaningful. No rush, no rules, just flow. As she stretched her side, reaching one arm overhead, her ribs expanded. Her breath deepened, her energy lifted. She felt warmth bloom from her core, a quiet strength waking within. Each stretch told a story of care, patience, and return. The body remembers kindness, she thought, and it always responds to love. When she finally finished, she stood still for a while. Hands over her heart. Eyes closed. The stiffness had softened, the pain had eased. But more than that, something inside her had changed. She wasn't just moving her body. She was moving her spirit. And as the morning sun rose higher, she whispered to herself, "I can begin again." In the days that followed, something began to shift in Margaret's mornings. It wasn't just her body that changed, it was her mind. Each stretch felt like a quiet conversation between her thoughts and her breath. She started to notice the spaces between movements, the silence between inhales and exhales. Those moments became her sanctuary. Before, her mornings had been filled with rushing thoughts and worries. Now they began with calm intention. She would light a candle, open the window, and let the air touch her skin. The world outside was still waking, birds whispering in the distance. Margaret stood there, grounded, aware of every breath. She began to realize that stretching was more than a physical act. It was a doorway to peace. As her arms extended, her thoughts softened. As her spine lengthened, her heart felt lighter. Her breath no longer chased her, it guided her. Each slow motion became a rhythm of release. In the stillness of her room, she felt connected to her body, her mind, her life. She remembered how often she had ignored her body's voice. The small aches she dismissed, the fatigue she brushed aside. Now she listened deeply. Every stretch revealed something she had once buried: stress, tension, emotion. Sometimes she felt tears rise, not from pain but from remembering. Her body had held stories she never told aloud. Each muscle carried a memory, each joint a moment of her life. And as she moved, she began to let them go. Her mind, once cluttered, began to clear. She found joy in the smallest things: the sound of her breath, the softness of light. Stretching became her daily meditation, her prayer of gratitude. There was no judgment, no comparison, no need to be perfect. Only awareness. Only kindness. The more she stretched, the more her world expanded. Colors seemed brighter. Her laughter came easier. She felt more patient with herself and others. Her mind no longer raced toward what was next. It lingered gently in the now. Movement taught her mindfulness in ways words never could. When her body moved slowly, her thoughts slowed too. When she breathed deeply, her worries dissolved. She began to understand that flexibility wasn't just for the muscles. It was for the spirit. To bend without breaking. To move without fear. To grow without rushing. Every morning, she found a new piece inside her routine. It wasn't about chasing energy, it was about creating calm. And in that calm, she discovered strength she had never known. Her joints felt freer, yes, but her heart did too. Stretching had become her quiet ritual of healing. her moving meditation, a practice of softness in a world that often feels hard. And as she finished each morning, she whispered a small truth to herself. Peace begins in the body, and the body always listens. One afternoon, Margaret sat by the window and watched the rain fall. Each drop traced a soft path down the glass, steady and calm. She thought about how movement had returned to her life, not fast but sure. Still, a quiet fear sometimes lingered in her mind. The fear of aging. The thought that one day her body might not keep up. It was a fear she rarely spoke aloud, but it followed her like a shadow. She remembered the day her friend Ruth had sighed, saying, "We're just getting old." Margaret had smiled politely, but her heart disagreed. Getting older didn't mean stopping. It meant changing pace, finding new ways to move. That night she stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. There were lines around her eyes, softness in her arms, silver in her hair. But there was also strength, a quiet kind that only time can give. She lifted her arms and began her evening stretch. Slow circles, deep breath, eyes closed. The movements were gentle, yet full of purpose. As she stretched, she whispered softly to herself, "This is not the end of movement, it's the evolution of it." Her fear began to fade with each breath. She realized aging was not losing. It was learning to listen differently. Her joints spoke a new language now, one of patience and respect. They didn't need to run or jump or prove. They needed care. Grace. She remembered how society often framed aging as decline. But she saw something else, resilience. The body adapts. It remembers what it needs. And when treated with kindness, it responds beautifully. Margaret began to think of her morning stretches as love letters to herself. Each movement said, "I care for you." Each breath said, "You are enough." When she shared her practice with friends, many laughed at first. Some said they were too old. Others said it was too late to begin. She smiled and told them what she had learned. It's never too late to come home to your body. One by one, they began to join her. In the park under the shade of old trees, they stretched together. A circle of silver hair, gentle laughter and soft breathing. Each one moving differently, yet all moving with the same purpose. To stay alive in motion. To stay free in spirit. Margaret looked around and felt her chest warm with pride. They were living proof that movement doesn't belong to the young. It belongs to anyone who chooses to begin. The fear that once held her was gone, replaced by gratitude, by quiet confidence. She had learned the truth that every aging heart deserves to know. That growing older is not about slowing down. It's about moving with meaning. And that even after 60, 70, or 80, the dance continues. Margaret's mornings soon became her favorite part of the day. She no longer rushed to check her phone or make breakfast. Instead, she began with silence, breath, and gentle movement. 10 minutes, that was all she needed. 10 minutes to return to herself. She had learned that routine was more powerful than intensity. It wasn't about doing everything perfectly. It was about showing up. Every single day. Her stretches had become as natural as brushing her teeth. Her body now expected it, welcomed it. Even on days when her joints felt heavy, she moved anyway. Slowly, softly, kindly. Because she had learned that the body rewards consistency. It blooms under attention. It strengthens under love. She began to write a small reminder in her notebook each morning. Move today, even a little. That phrase became her mantra. She didn't need fancy equipment or long sessions. Just space, breath, and intention. She created a small corner in her living room for her practice. A mat, a candle, a window full of light. It was her sanctuary, her private world of calm. Sometimes she played soft music. Sometimes she preferred the rhythm of her own breathing. Each morning felt like a quiet celebration of life. Her joints loosened, her balance improved, her sleep deepened. But more than that, her confidence grew. She trusted her body again. She no longer feared the stiffness that once ruled her mornings. It had lost its power, because now she met it with movement, not surrender. Her friends often asked how she stayed so committed. She smiled and said, "Because I love how it makes me feel. Not younger but freer. Not stronger but more alive." That freedom became her motivation. She started inviting her friends to stretch with her once a week. At first they giggled, awkward and unsure. Then, as the music played, they began to move. The laughter softened into calm silence. The room filled with steady breathing, soft smiles and light. Each of them carried stories in their joints, years in their bones. But together they moved with ease. They encouraged each other, reminded one another to keep going. It became more than a routine. It became a shared ritual of strength and care. Margaret realized that movement connected them all. No matter their age, their pace, their shape. Everyone could stretch. Everyone could begin again. And as weeks turned into months, her mornings became a gentle masterpiece. A portrait of resilience painted by time. Every breath, every movement, every smile told the same truth. That aging is not an end, but an evolution. That health is built in small, steady moments. And that the simplest habit, 10 minutes of stretching, can keep the spirit young forever. When she finished her morning stretch, she always whispered the same words. "Thank you, body, you've carried me well." And with that, another graceful day began. The sun was rising when Margaret finished her final stretch. The room glowed softly, her breath calm and steady. She stood by the window, feeling the warmth on her face. Her body no longer ached the way it once did. Her joints still whispered, but now in gratitude, not pain. She had learned the language of movement, slow and honest. Each breath told her she was still strong, still capable. She smiled, not because the stiffness was gone, but because she no longer feared it. She had found peace in motion, comfort in stillness. The fear of aging had turned into a quiet acceptance, a knowing that life continues to move, gently, gracefully. She thought of the girl she once was, and the woman she had become. Both lived within her, dancing, stretching, breathing as one. The morning light touched her hands, soft and golden. She whispered to herself, "I'm still here, I'm still moving." And in that whisper was everything: strength, love, and freedom. For every stretch was more than movement. It was a promise to live fully, in every season, at every age. A beginning over and over again.